The only redeeming part of this video is going to be because basically Brutus stabbed Caesar because he was fucking his mother for 20 years. Hi there, my name is Moray. I'm a fashion designer who loves history. We are doing a series on the partners of some of the most famous people throughout antiquity, and today we will be covering Julius Caesar, probably the most famous historical figure of all time, do you think? Julius Caesar is so famous that the name Caesar means royalty pretty much everywhere. Tsar in the Slavonic languages, Kaiser in the Germanic languages, and Caesar in the Arabic world. Julius Caesar has left an indelible mark. Is that a word? Julius Caesar has left a mark on history that is so wide. There's been so many plays about him. I don't like Julius Caesar, Gigi. Like, I don't have nice things to say about Julius Caesar. Caesar is most famous for having a relationship with Cleopatra, who is known as the beautiful and wise queen of Egypt. However, we never talk about Calpurnia, we never talk about Cornelia, and we never talk about Servilia and how Servilia's relationship to Caesar ended up with Caesar being stabbed to death. So let's get into it. Let's talk about Caesar's early life. He was a dictator. He was the world's most famous dictator. That's not a nice thing to say, but it is a true thing. So let's talk about Julius Caesar's family. So Caesar was born, rumored to be born in 100 BCE, and he was born into the Julius clan, okay? And this wasn't a particularly prestigious clan, especially with how far Caesar got, one of the most famous men in the world. But his father was an ally of a man called Gaius Marius, and let's discuss why his father, being an ally of Gaius Marius, was so important for all of Caesar's early years. So we're going to be discussing the conflict in between Cinna, Marius and Sulla. A huge proponent of Julius Caesar's early life was shaped by the Cinna, Sulla and Marius conflict. We have a statesman called Cornelius Cinna, and he becomes a popular statesman in 87 BCE. And Cinna was a advocate for the populars fraction, okay? So the fraction, there was the populars and the optimates. And the populars fraction was the fraction that was pro-pleb. So it was very Jeremy Corbyn, it was giving Anna Bevan, it was giving, I can't say Kamala Harris, but definitely Bernie Sanders. And the optimates fraction felt very Ronald Reagan, it felt very Margaret Thatcher. Lucius Cornelius Cinna, who was a representative of the populars faction in Rome, which represented the plebeians. And then you have Sulla, who represented the optimates fraction. And these two butted heads, and there was civil war that erupted in Rome. It's actually Julius Caesar's father who was a huge supporter of Gaius Marius, who was head of the populars faction of the conflict. And this made Caesar a target for conflict. And it was Cinna who associated himself with Marius, and we all know that Caesar's father was associated with Marius himself, and Marius was very much for the populars fraction, right? However, obviously Sulla, who was a senator that was an advocate of the optimates fraction, was not happy, and this created a civil war. Caesar marries his first wife, age 16, Cornelia, and her family is deeply connected to the Gaius Marius family. So Sulla says to Caesar, you must divorce your wife or get killed. What does Caesar do? Caesar decides to run away and makes the hard decision to leave Rome. However, Caesar soon returns. Sulla passes away in 78 BCE, and with Sulla gone, it means that Caesar can begin his political career. Julia is born in 76 BCE. She is a very beloved daughter of Caesar and Cornelia. And it's then that Caesar decides to go to Greece, go to Rhodes, and study with the same tutor that tutored Cicero. In 73 BCE, Julius Caesar becomes a pontifex, and Caesar starts making alliances, especially with Pompey and Crassus, who you're going to hear a lot about later in this video. Caesar's wife passes, Cornelia ends up dying, and in order to keep a balance of voices in the Senate and keep peace, because the time Julius was starting out in was a time of anarchy, Julius marries Pompeia. Let's talk about Julius's marriage to Pompeia. Pompeia is Sulla's granddaughter. In 63 BCE, Caesar is announced as the Pontifex Maximus. So he's the chief priest of the Roman state religion. So not only is he dabbling in power, but he's dabbling in religion. And now we're going to talk about the Bona Dea scandal. We're going to talk about the scandalous party. And we're going to be talking about Pulcher. Bloody Pulcher. Maybe I'll do a video on Pulcher in the future. So in 62 BCE, Pulcher sneaks into a party that is solely for women. Remember, especially in the Roman Republic, women and men were very separated, and Pulcher is a perv, so he sneaks into this party trying to seduce Pompeia. And Pulcher goes disguised as a woman, and Pulcher is a character that is kind of like Boris Johnson, realistically. Boris Johnson compares himself to Winston Churchill, but he's like actually like Pulcher. But anyway, Caesar blames Pompeia for Pulcher coming in to this party, and he divorces Pompeia, the granddaughter of Sulla, which makes him a political target once again. So in 60 BCE, we're going to talk about the first triumvirate. So this is the informal alliance between Julius Caesar, Pompey the Great, and Crassus, and we spoke about them earlier. And it's the sharing of power, the triumvirate. Crassus, how should we I'm going to talk about these people and compare them to modern day people. So it's kind of like if Elon Musk, who would be the modern day version of Crassus, he's the wealthiest man in Europe. And Crassus also had an army, and he defeated Spartacus in the Third Punic War. In 59 BCE, we see that Julius Caesar's beloved daughter, Julia, marries Pompey, the rich guy. And this is a good political move, it's strengthening ties. However, Julius Caesar also gets married again. And Julius Caesar marries Calpurnia. Calpurnia is the daughter of Lucius Calpurnius Piso. It's hard to say. And it's a political marriage, it's not a love marriage like his first love, Cornelia, who he risked death for. But Caesar is about strengthening these military ties and creating the best republic he possibly can. Now, we're going to talk about some Celtic stuff now, which is my personal favourite thing. In 56 BCE, we see that Caesar defeats the Veneti in Brittany, so the Celtic tribes. The reason I make these videos is because I'm really interested in the Gallo-Roman period of history, so the Celtic-Roman period of history, and Caesar has written probably the greatest piece of propaganda on that period. He becomes governor of Gaul, and Pompey is granted to become governor of Hispania, which we know as Spain. Crassus received Syria, so they all got a little chunk out of this empire that they were growing. Oh yeah, in 56 BCE, Caesar crosses the English Channel and comes to the UK!
Wow.
Wow, we've had many famous celebrities here, haven't we? But then he kind of enslaves my people and then writes a propaganda book about it. Around this time, Caesar writes Commentary di Belli Gallico, or basically the conquest of Gaul. In this book, Caesar gives a very biased view of Celts. He says that they are very buff, and they are barbarians. And, I mean, in modern day times, it's actually a very nice view, but he wanted to paint out the Celts as savages and therefore justify him conquering them. However, the biggest problem is with this book, not to go on the tangent, is that Celts didn't write their own history, so it's one of the only sources I have about my ancestors. And even though it's propaganda, it's, well, one of the only sources I have about my ancestors, so I still read it and I'm still very interested in it. In 54 BCE, Julius Caesar's daughter Julia passes during childbirth with Pompey's child, and even though Pompey and Caesar get through this hard time together, fractions are starting to grow between the both of them. In 53 BCE, we see that Caesar crosses the Rhine, and Crassus ended up dying during the building of the Parthian Empire, and Pompey and Caesar are alone together, the last two of the triumvirate. Caesar ends up defeating Vercingetorix. I'm really struggling with pronouncing that, even though it's a Celtic name, and I should know how to pronounce that, and that's a major win for him. During this time as well, Pompey is elected sole consul, and him and Caesar are officially rivals. In 49 BCE, this is when Caesar, knowing that he needs to keep his army safe, crosses the Rubicon, and this is a very bold statement. Caesar, during his time crossing the Rubicon, wears the purple. He wears the purple. And I speak about wearing the purple quite a lot in these videos, but it means becoming emperor. In Caesar's case, he was becoming a dictator, but the wearing of the purple, he started a trend. Caesar crossed the Rubicon wearing purple, so I'm gonna show that I am the main guy and wear the purple when I come into power. However, it doesn't mean he's dictator yet, so hold on for that. In 49 BCE, this starts a civil war in between Caesar and Pompey. The Senate tells Caesar that he needs to take himself out of the situation.
Stop it. Get some help.
Disband his army and calm down, because the Roman Republic, everything they've built, is at stake. Pompey flees to Egypt, and this is where we're going to see Caesar's main character storyline. How do I say it though? Because it's like very romanticized, isn't it? I mean, I don't know whether Cleo is more famous for her dalliance with Mark Antony or whether she's famous for her dalliance with Caesar. Pompey is defeated at the Battle of Pharsalus, and this leads Caesar to becoming the dictator. Yes, he crossed the Rubicon in his purple and manifested his destiny in 48 BCE. Dictator! Caesar is not happy about just becoming dictator. In 48 BCE, he goes to Egypt because he still wants Pompey dead. He just cannot have enough power. However, he meets a young, beautiful queen by the name of Cleopatra, and thus begins an affair that is probably the most famous love story in history. Now, I just want to note as well that people treat Cleopatra and Caesar's affair like the greatest love story in history, but realistically, Cleopatra was dealing with a power vacuum due to her father and needed Caesar's help, and Egypt was up for grabs. So realistically, it was a political alliance, a political affair, rather than one of love. But because in this series we do discuss it in the context of the women in his life, I want to talk about how Calpurnia might have felt. His wife that he just left at home. In 46 BCE, Cleopatra comes to Rome with their son Caesarion, and it's not a good time for Calpurnia. Calpurnia has to be the ideal Roman woman, and quite frankly, Roman women who were of high status, despite being educated, highly educated, speaking multiple languages, they had to let their husbands get on with it, and Caesar was pretty much living with Cleopatra. However, Cleopatra was not the only affair Caesar was having. Caesar was f***ing Brutus's mother, Servilia.
Nani?
Actually, there's a rumor that Caesar was the father of Brutus, but that meant that Caesar would have had to father him at age 15 whilst being normal in Rome is unlikely due to the historical timelines. However, all the memes about Caesar and Servilia and Caesar being a motherfucker online are quite funny, but they're actually quite historically accurate, because it's Cicero who is the one that states that in his letters to Atticus, looking at the Idols of March, because, spoiler alert, Caesar gets stabbed in 44 BCE, but Cicero states that Servilia, who Caesar had known for a long, long time, had loaned Brutus's mother money. He bought her pills. And quite frankly, Brutus was not happy about calling Caesar daddy. In 44 BCE, we see that Caesar officially becomes dictator, and he names his heir Augustus, who is his great nephew. Now, Augustus is the man who created the empire, who created the expansion of Rome. However, the Senate has a shift. Caesar is living with one of the richest women in the world of the time, Cleopatra.
Don't miss a sizzling second of the all-new lifestyles of the rich and famous.
He's being egotistical. He's going to break up the Republic. He's going to break up all the hard work. And the Idols of March happens, so Caesar gets stabbed to death. Obviously, there are many reasons that Caesar gets stabbed to death. He became dictator for a huge length of time. First of all, it was 1 year, 10 years, and then he declared himself for life. And then he's threatening these Republic values, and the senators are worried about this. So, yes, Caesar's downfall, whilst being for the end of the Republic, created a new dawn, the Augustan age. And it was all down to him Brutus's mother. No, it wasn't. Caesar's downfall was devastating for the Republic. However, it ushered in a new age, the Augustan age, the age of Octavian, the start of this wonderful empire that we all know and love. And his dalliances with women got him there, whether it was from Cornelia, who he loved so much he would risk life and death, and birthed him a beautiful daughter, to Cleopatra, as we know in pulp culture, one of the most beautiful women in the world, but instead she was very rich and had quite a bit of power. And Calpurnia, the poor Roman woman, along with Servilia, who Brutus was not very happy about. I don't enjoy talking about the Republic, it's not chaotic enough for me, but if you have enjoyed this video, give it a like and inspire me to talk more about it. The next video we will do actually is on Cicero and his letters to Atticus, his best friend. It's talked about the best friendship in all of Roman history. I honestly don't enjoy talking about the Republic. It's a bit too primitive and it's a bit too political for me. I like to learn about the drama, the conflict, the change of cultures that was so rapid within the empire. And, you know, apart from the Etruscan era, pre-Empire Rome isn't interesting to me. See you in our next video, which is going to be about Atticus and Cicero, the only interesting part of the Roman Republic.